All right, so someone asked, what does progress look or feel like for the protocol? So, one of the first things to keep an eye out for are positive lead indicators. Just reading from the document itself, there might be things like subtle, distant puffs of relief, subtle over the shoulder was already there, at least in the moment before, like memories or insights, subtle changes in muscle tension. Um, there can so that's one thing. um, at some point a person might experience like something like a stream entry type event where there'll be sort of kind of like a big whoosh or like a big something of insight, that can be possibly kind of beginning insights into determinism where just sort of things are just happening, especially thing, and then also especially things like emptiness, provisionality, or like non-reification. There can be like some no self stuff. So there might be just kind of a beginning taste of like those sorts of classical things. Um, as a person gets farther, um, there are things like sort of handledness or settledness. Here I've got written provisional handledness or provisional settledness, um, where certain kinds of like questions or concerns or like life somethings, just like more and more of that gets like handled or settled, loosely, openly, but um, that's kind of a thing as well. um, there will be increases in like sort of well-being, non-suppressive, appropriate physical stillness, autonomic harmony, like existential okayness, um, and that's over like hundreds and thousands of hours. Um, and then sort of in like the far reaches, there's you sort of get into stuff like the self is just spontaneously happening. Everything is just spontaneously happening, and like as that kind of continues, there's sort of some receding of the self, kind of like in ways that are that like kind of the whole thing is okay with, and like things continue to like phenomenologically change and like kind of things can almost like start to like glow. Uh, but like I don't know. That's just sort of not the end. Um, things just sort of keep going after that into something like radical deconditioning, um, where things can just keep getting better and better and better, and like the self system can keep getting more and more and more sort of adapted to its niche, and more proactively so, and in more sort of far-reaching ways. Um, so like uh, a person might sort of, as things get sort of settled and handled, like take more risks, albeit although like from like a safe position, or sort of more proactiveness in the world, or more engagement, or more interest, more curiosity. Curiosity is like a big thing that kind of goes up. um, so I don't know, that was like very fast, and I just lightly touched on like a bunch of different stuff. um, but these are all things that progress can look and feel like over anywhere from 5 hours to like 10,000 hours. So the other thing to add to this is that, um, even when one gets really far, um, it's less and less likely to be a thing. But if things are too fast, too intense, too painful, too surprising, um, things can like still be, can still produce anxiety, can still produce suffering. Um, Statistically speaking, this happens less and less and less and less over time, like the more a person practices. Um, but the world can still throw curveballs. Um, and then the other thing is that there can be sort of endogenous non-monotonicities where, um, the system, is raising like old painful content, for sort of burn off or refactoring or whatever, or things are getting like desuppressed, or the system is like just kind of shipping stuff around. that can be, like really, really painful and really destabilizing, and can cause like problems in one's daily life. Um, and that becomes less of a thing and more predictable over time. And one can sort of start to get a feel for like what's left and how likely that is to occur, and have like like a little bit of sort of yeah, just predictability around it, and so like it's less disruptive to one's life. Uh, but yeah, this kind of stuff can go on for a long time, for thousands of hours, as sort of progress sort of looks like this, where things are getting better and also things are getting hard at times. And often like uh, sometimes sort of the very reason that someone decided to meditate in the first place, because they sort of exhausted maybe like all other options. So like, all right, well, I'll do this crazy thing that, might take thousands of hours or whatever. Um, that's usually going to be some kind of really big problem. Uh, and, around like um, sexuality or gender or career or meaning or purpose, or intimacy or relationships, um, or just something just feels really bad and the person doesn't know why. Um, Often those kinds of things, like there'll be movement in those things, they'll change, they'll be like sculpted a little bit, but often um, sort of the deepest stuff, the deepest like bad stuff, like doesn't really go away or shift until a person is thousands of hours in, 5,000 hours, 10,000 hours, probably in some like rare cases like 12,000 hours, 15,000 hours. I think like on the order of like 10,000 hours is something, as far as I can tell, small sample size. Um, so like the whole thing is like can be pretty hard. Um, but like even if certain things like aren't kind of happening for like a really long time, it's like all those things that I said in the first part of the video are still happening along the way. So like tons and tons and tons of stuff is getting like non-monotonically better. So it's not like it's just you do this thing and nothing happens, and at the end like things are things flip over. So like throughout there's this sort of combination of like good and bad and ups and downs. So like big time investment, big opportunity costs, like risks involved, but like also potentially like um, huge sort of slow burning, slow growing payoff that depending on how a person allots their time, whether they kind of front load this or kind of spread it through part of their life, um, yeah, just huge impact on like sort of the rest of their life. Um, but yeah, I don't know, it's messy. It's messy.